Hey everybody, welcome back to Winamac Hockey. Today was a big day in the NHL because Kevin Fiala goes from Minnesota over to the Los Angeles Kings. And in this video, Jake and I are going to break it down. Stay tuned. All right, everybody, if you are a Los Angeles Kings fan, you have got to be pumped because Kevin Fiala is coming over from the Minnesota Wild to help boost that team deeper into the playoffs this next season. In exchange, Minnesota received the LA Kings first-round draft pick as well as a prospect. So, Jake, let's talk about this. First of all, who do you think wins the trade here? Do you think it's LA receiving Kevin Fiala and then signing him to what seems like a great contract, at least right now? Or do you think it's Minnesota who's looking to acquire some more depth to their team and hopefully push for the playoffs later next season as well?
I think the Kings definitely won this. And I think it sucks for Minnesota. I think if they didn't have these cap issues, they wouldn't have to have traded Fiala. But from the Kings' perspective, if you wanted to acquire a player in free agency this summer that's point per game, over point per game like Fiala is, it's going to cost you more than the contract that they signed him for, which I believe is $7.9 million for 7 years, which is also interesting that they didn't go for that 8th-year option since technically he would be their player at that point. But 7 years, you've got Fiala for a long time on a pretty good contract, and I think that this is only the beginning of his career. He's still pretty young. They went after Victor Arvidsson last year. This is a team that's telling its fans, we want to compete. And they proved that they can this year. How about that playoff spot?
Absolutely. And, we got to think about the Pacific Division as well because it wasn't that great this year. Vegas doesn't look like they're going to make that much of a rebound next year. So with the Pacific being the way that it is, I think it kind of helped jump the Kings rebuild, at least maybe by a year or two, at least in my opinion. But either way, that team we did talk about last year at this time, and we did say that they would have a really good shot of making the playoffs this year, and lo and behold, they did. And I think that adding this piece is not only going to secure them a spot this upcoming season, but also potentially get them out of the first round because they didn't look that bad against Edmonton, and that team advanced to the Western Conference Finals. So, Jake, honestly, though, let's think about this too. Dustin Brown retired as an LA King. And so what do? They wasted no time going out and getting someone that can kind of hop in and take over that spot. And a guy like Kevin Fiala is going to fill in pretty nicely, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that from the video we did on the Kings last summer, people love Dustin Brown. And I think that Kevin Fiala is going to be just as loved. He was a fan favorite in Minnesota just for how much heart he has for the game. And something else that you mentioned is that teams like Vegas may not be the best that we've seen in the coming season, but you also look at the other powerhouses in the Pacific. Edmonton, somehow they have even more questions in goal with Koskinen going overseas. Mike Smith is got one foot in the grave. He's getting older and older. And they don't really have answers for that. It's going to be probably Skinner stepping in as their starting goalie next year. And that's not good. So they're not going to be great next year. And then you have Calgary. What if Johnny Gaudreau walks? That team's going to be in a downward spiral. They're not going to know what to do without Johnny Gaudreau. He's been on the team for so long. So this is the perfect opportunity for the Kings to really step up and lead the Pacific.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think that there are any other holes in that roster? Obviously, Kevin Fiala filled a big one as being a top line mate over there. But do you think that there are some weaknesses that LA is going to have to address this offseason in order to really assert their dominance in that division?
I think really their issue this year was depth. So they need that depth scoring. So adding Kevin Fiala is a great first step into that. I'm not sure where their cap space is. Maybe make a couple of acquisitions just for depth roles in free agency. But the issue that I could see happening in this coming season, and quite honestly, I have no reason to question it, but Jonathan Quick, how can you help but question a goaltender who's 36 now? He's also old. He's in the Mike Smith situation. where some nights Mike Smith was a god. I can't take that away from him. He was so good. But then he was also one of the worst goalies in the entire league some nights. So if you can keep getting consistency out of Jonathan Quick, you've got nothing to worry about. But when they start getting up there in age, you can't really be too sure.
Yeah, so it looks like we agree with the fact that the LA Kings are going to be a team that is going to earn their respect this season for sure. But let's kind of flip over to the Minnesota side of things. They just got back into the playoffs, and they were looking pretty good until, St. Louis ultimately just the depth on their team outmatched the depth on Minnesota's team. And now they just lost one of their top players. I mean, how are they going to bounce back from this? They have 2 first-round picks, but they're not until later in the first round. What do you think that they can do to potentially fill that void and get back in the playoffs?
Yeah, honestly, if you're a Wild fan and you're watching this, it's going to get worse before it gets better. The contracts that they bought out really shot them in the foot. And it's likely that they're going to have to get rid of someone like Matt Dumba this offseason. They're going to have to keep thinning out their depth. They might lose Marc-Andre Fleury, which if I'm the GM, I don't think Marc-Andre Fleury is going to break the bank this summer just because he's at that point in his career. If he wants to play another season, give him a contract in Minnesota. It'll make him happy. It'll make the fans happy. And anything you can do to make the fans happy at this point, do it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So do you think Minnesota is going to sneak into the playoffs next year? Maybe even as a wild card?
The Central is really up in the air at this point. I think you've still got some locked in powerhouses like you have Colorado and you have the Blues. But other than that, like the Blackhawks are questionable. And I think anytime you have a star like the Blackhawks do, you could make the playoffs. So, it's hard to say in a Central that's so up in the air. But yeah, I think really it's going to depend on what the Central looks like. I don't think it's going to be a matter of Minnesota playing up to expectations, although they do have Kirill Kaprizov, who is going to be a star. And I do feel bad that he locked in that long-term contract and he's going to be stuck on this team for a while.
Yeah, I will say though, with Winnipeg, it looks like that they're sellers right now. With Pierre-Luc Dubois, the Hawks obviously have come out and apparently want to trade Alex DeBrincat for some stupid reason. So Nashville, I mean, who knows where they're going to be? They came out and really exceeded expectations this past season, but can they keep that up moving forward? That's going to be interesting. So ultimately, I think that there's, like you said, the 2 top teams in the Central, and then the rest are really going to be clawing and scratching to try to get that 3rd spot. And maybe Minnesota fans, you guys could be one of those teams that squeaks in. But other than that, I mean, it's not looking too great.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that the Kings could be in a good spot to push because the Flames could be losing Goodrow. How about Minnesota moving past Nashville if they lose Philip Forsberg? So there's so many questions we have yet to answer this offseason. You really can't say.
Yep. And that's why it's going to be exciting as we move forward. So with that, any other comments about the Kevin Fiala trade?
Yeah, sorry, Wild fans. I think it's going to be a rough offseason. But Kings, please continue surprising us because it's been fun.
Absolutely. Hey, guys, thanks for tuning into this video. Leave a comment down below. Who do you think won the trade? The Kings, the Wild, or Kevin Fiala himself? We'll see you next time on Winnemac Hockey.